It was another grueling evening in Lagos. Anita's back was screaming from scrubbing floors for 12 hours straight. She had just finished her shift as a maid. She was mentally preparing for a blind date her neighbor had begged her to go on. As a struggling single mother with a baby strapped to her chest, Anita had zero interest in romance. She was just trying to survive. But her neighbor insisted she go. She told Anita she could not keep suffering alone. She clutched baby Zion tighter as she arrived at the glass doors of the Imperial restaurant. This was not just not her kind of place. She looked like an alien here. Her shirt was stained with baby formula and bleach. Her shoes were worn thin. She was terrified, but at the same time she was desperate for a free meal. As she walked into the luxury restaurant, the patrons fell silent. Their eyes burned into her disheveled appearance. Her neighbor had told her to look out for a man in a blue suit. She thought she saw him. She spotted a man at the best table dressed in a sharp blue suit. He looked like he was waiting for someone. Without thinking much, fear pushed her forward. She walked over to the table with Zion whimpering in her arms. She cleared her throat and whispered, "Are you waiting for me?" The man looked up from his phone. He took in the stained shirt and the baby. He smiled gently. "I did not expect you to bring company. Please have a seat." If you're just tuning into this channel, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to share with your friends and family, and tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. Anita sat on the edge of the velvet chair. Her heart thumped hard against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every clink of silverware around them sounded like a judgment. It was a sharp reminder that she and little Zion were intruders in this palace of glass and gold. She looked down at her shirt. The formula stain bloomed on her shoulder like a badge of shame. She looked up at the man across from her. He was perfect. His suit was sharp and his gaze was steady. He had not stopped looking at her since she sat down. "I am sorry," she stammered. Her voice was barely a whisper. She was terrifyingly aware of the curious stares from the neighboring tables. "I know I look bad. I did not have a babysitter. My neighbor said you were kind, but I did not think it would be this fancy." She trailed off. She expected him to signal the waiter to escort her out. She braced herself for the humiliation. She clutched Zion tighter to her chest. She was ready to bolt before the insults started. Matthew watched her. He noted the tremors in her rough, work-worn hands. He saw the fierce protective way she held the child. He had been waiting for a potential investor and not a blind date. But seeing the raw panic in her wide eyes, he made a split-second decision. He saw the manager approaching with a deep frown. The man was ready to intervene and remove the disturbance. Matthew raised a hand. He did not summon security. He waved them away with a stern look that demanded privacy. "I do not mind at all," Matthew lied smoothly. His voice was a deep rumble that seemed to create a shield around their table. He leaned forward. His expression softened from corporate indifference to genuine intrigue. "In fact, I admire it. Most people would have made an excuse and canceled. You showed up." Anita blinked. The tension in her shoulders unlocked just a fraction. "I did not want to be rude," she admitted. Her guard slowly lowered. Matthew smiled. A warmth reached his eyes that made her forget the stains on her clothes. "Then let us not be rude to the chef," he said. He opened the menu and slid it toward her. "Order whatever you want. Tonight you are not an inconvenience, Anita. You are my guest." For the first time all day, she did not feel like a stain on the world. She felt seen. Just as Anita began to breathe easy, a harsh voice cut through the air. "Anita, look over here." She froze. She turned her head slowly. A man stood near the hostess station. He wore a faded polo shirt and looked annoyed. He pointed a finger right at her. "That is her," he grumbled to the hostess. "She is at the wrong table." The blood drained from Anita's face. She looked back at Matthew. His kind smile shifted into confusion. The truth hit her like a physical blow. This man in the perfect blue suit was not her date. He was a stranger. He was a wealthy stranger she had bothered with her stained clothes and crying baby. The shame burned her cheeks. She was not a guest here. She was a spectacle. "I made a mistake," Anita whispered. Her voice trembled. "I am so sorry. I did not know." Matthew reached out a hand to stop her. "Anita, wait," he said. But the panic had already taken over. She felt the weight of every eye in the room. They were all staring at her. The judgment felt heavy. She felt small and dirty. She could not bear it for another second. She scrambled to her feet. The chair legs screeched against the marble floor. It was a loud, ugly sound. It silenced the nearby conversations. "I have to go," she said. She clutched Zion so tight he let out a startled cry. She did not wait for Matthew to speak again. She turned and ran. She wove frantically between the tables. She was desperate to reach the exit. She wanted to disappear into the dark streets. In her haste to escape, she did not notice something fall. The faded yellow scarf she used to cover Zion slipped from her bag. It fluttered silently to the ground near Matthew's feet. It lay there on the polished floor like a fallen leaf. Anita pushed through the glass doors and vanished into the night. She left behind the only man who had treated her like a queen. Matthew stood in the entrance of the restaurant, holding the faded yellow scarf. It was rough and worn thin from too many washes. It smelled of baby powder and cheap soap. He could not go back to his table. He could not finish his wine. He was haunted by the look of pure terror in her eyes when she fled. The way she clutched her son made his chest ache. He had to know she was safe. He examined the cloth in his hands. It was not just a scarf. It was a piece of a uniform. On the hem there was a small tag written in permanent marker. It read City Cleaners Shift B. It was a long shot, but it was the only clue he had. Matthew walked out to his car and made a phone call. He used his influence and resources. He demanded to know where the cleaning crew for that shift was working that night. An hour later, he parked his sleek black car on a street filled with potholes. This was the mainland. It was far from the gleaming lights and air conditioning of Victoria Island. The air here was thick with dust and the smell of exhaust. He walked into a run-down office building that looked like it had been abandoned. The walls were peeling and the hallway lights flickered. He heard the rhythmic sound of a stiff brush scrubbing against concrete. He followed the noise down a narrow corridor. Then he saw her. Anita was on her hands and knees. She was scrubbing a stain on the floor with fierce determination. She wore the same stained shirt, but now her sleeves were rolled up. Her arms were covered in soap suds and sweat. Matthew looked to the corner. A cardboard box sat on the floor lined with old newspapers. Baby Zion was fast asleep inside it. This was her daycare. The reality of her poverty hit Matthew like a physical blow. He had seen poverty on the news, but seeing it up close was different. It was raw and brutal. But then he looked back at Anita. She was not crying. She was not begging. She was working. She was fighting for her son with every stroke of that brush. He had never seen anything more dignified in his life. He stepped forward and his dress shoe clicked on the broken tile. Anita froze. She looked up and her eyes went wide with shock. Matthew stood in the doorway of her cramped one-room apartment. His presence seemed to fill the entire space. The smell of his expensive cologne clashed with the scent of damp walls and kerosene. Anita stood by the small stove. She shielded Zion with her body. She was ready to tell him to leave. But Matthew did not look at the peeling paint with judgment. He looked at her with kindness. He cleared his throat. He told her he had a proposition. He needed a head of staff for his private residence. He said the current staff were efficient, but they lacked heart. He offered her the job. The salary was more than she could make in a year of scrubbing floors. He also said there was a small cottage on the grounds where she and Zion could live rent-free. Anita felt a lump in her throat. She gripped the edge of the table. She asked him why he would do this for a stranger. She asked him what he wanted in return. She had learned the hard way that nothing in life was free. Matthew stepped closer, but he kept a respectful distance. He said he wanted nothing but her hard work. He said he saw a dignity in her that money could not buy. He called it friendship. Anita looked at Zion. He was sleeping in a cardboard box she had lined with blankets. Her heart broke. She could not let her pride starve her son. She looked back at Matthew and nodded. She said she would take the job. The next few days were a blur. They began to spend time together as she prepared for the move. One afternoon they sat on a park bench. Matthew bought ice cream for her. It was a simple vanilla cone. Anita watched him eat it. He looked like a little boy. He told her he never stopped for ice cream because he was always too busy running his empire. Anita laughed for the first time in months. She told him he was missing out on the best parts of life. He looked at her and said he was starting to realize that. They sat there with the wealthy CEO in his suit and the poor maid in her faded dress. The world saw a prince and a pauper. But in that moment they were just two people sharing a sweet silence. Rachel sat in her father's mansion and tapped her manicured nails on the glass table. She was the daughter of Chief Timothy, and she always got what she wanted. Everyone knew she was supposed to marry Matthew. It was the perfect union of old money and new power. But Matthew had been different lately. He missed their dinner dates. He stopped returning her calls. He seemed distracted by something. Rachel did not like being ignored. She decided to find out why. She hired a private investigator to track his movements. The photos came back the next morning. Rachel stared at them in disbelief. There was Matthew, the CEO of a billion-naira company. He was sitting on a plastic chair in a dirty street. He was laughing with a woman who looked like a beggar. Rachel squinted at the photo. She recognized the uniform. It was the help. A maid. Rachel felt a cold rage burn in her chest. She drove her luxury car to the address where Anita worked. She waited until Anita finished her shift. Anita walked out of the gate with Zion strapped to her back. She looked exhausted. Her hands were rough from scrubbing. Rachel stepped out of her car. She looked flawless in her designer dress and expensive sunglasses. She blocked Anita's path. Anita looked up with fear in her eyes. She knew who Rachel was. Rachel looked Anita up and down with pure disgust. She let out a cruel laugh. She asked Anita if she really thought she had a chance with a man like Matthew. She told Anita she was delusional. She said Matthew is a king, and kings do not marry servants. Rachel pointed at Anita's worn shoes. She said, "Look at you. You smell like bleach and poverty. You are nothing but a charity case to him. Do you really think he could love someone who cleans toilets for a living?" Anita held Zion tighter. She tried to walk away, but Rachel stepped closer. She whispered a final threat. She told Anita to stay away from Matthew. She said, "If you do not, I will make sure you never work in this city again." Rachel got back in her car and sped off. She left Anita standing in the dust. Anita felt small and dirty. The words cut deeper than any knife. The car ride to the estate was quiet. Anita smoothed the fabric of her dress over and over. It was the finest thing she owned. But as the iron gates of the mansion loomed over them, she felt the familiar knot of fear in her stomach. Matthew squeezed her hand. He told her it would be fine. He lied. They walked into a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old polish. Matthew's mother was waiting in the drawing room. She stood as still as a statue. She wore pearls that cost a fortune. Matthew stepped forward. He introduced Anita with pride in his voice. His mother did not offer her hand. She merely tilted her head. Her eyes were like ice. She looked at Anita's hair. She looked at her shoes. She said nothing warm. She just told Matthew he was late. Matthew's father sat in a leather chair near the window. He grunted when Matthew said hello. He did not even look at Anita. He acted like she was invisible. Then Anita saw her. Rachel was sitting on the velvet sofa. She looked right at home. She held a glass of champagne and smirked. Anita froze. She did not know Rachel would be there. Rachel stood up and glided over. She kissed Matthew on the cheek. She looked at Anita with mock pity. Dinner was a nightmare. The table was set with silver and crystal. There were too many forks. Anita did not know which one to use. She waited for Matthew to start so she could copy him. Rachel noticed. She let out a sharp laugh. She leaned over to Matthew's mother. She whispered loudly, "Look at that. She is lost." Anita picked up a fork. Rachel shook her head. She said, "Oh honey, that is for the fish. But do not worry. We do not expect someone like you to know table manners. It is not your fault you were raised differently." Matthew slammed his hand on the table. He told Rachel enough. But Rachel ignored him. She pointed a manicured finger at Anita's dress. She asked if it was flammable. She said she could smell the cheap fabric from across the table. Matthew's mother took a sip of wine. She watched Anita struggle. She said in a calm, cold voice, "Matthew, dear, we have standards in this family. Are you sure she can keep up?" Anita felt the tears burn her eyes. She gripped the tablecloth. She wanted to run. But she looked at Matthew's pained face. She decided to stay. The evening at the sprawling family mansion was suffocating. Anita stood near the edge of the grand living room, holding Zion tight against her chest. She tried to make herself invisible. She knew she did not belong among these people in their silk dresses and tailored suits. Matthew stayed close to her side, but he was pulled away by his father for a business discussion. This left Anita alone and vulnerable. Rachel watched her from across the room with cold eyes. She held a glass of expensive champagne. She saw her opportunity when Anita turned to comfort a fussy Zion. Rachel slipped past the chair where Anita had placed her worn tote bag. With a quick sleight of hand, she dropped her heavy diamond bracelet inside the open pocket. It landed softly on top of the diapers. Moments later, a shrill scream cut through the music. Rachel clutched her wrist and gasped. "My diamond bracelet is gone. It is a family heirloom. Someone has stolen it." The room went deadly silent. Matthew's mother stepped forward immediately. Her eyes snapped directly to Anita. She did not even hesitate. She pointed a manicured finger at the trembling maid. "Search her bag." Anita shook her head in terror. "I did not take anything. Please, I promise." But two large security guards stepped forward. They grabbed her bag roughly. Matthew rushed back into the room, asking what was happening. But it was too late. The guard appended the bag onto a table. Zion's pacifier and old clothes fell out. Then the diamond bracelet tumbled out and sparkled under the chandelier light. A collective gasp filled the room. Matthew's mother looked triumphant and disgusted. "I knew it. I knew you were nothing but a common thief. You came here to rob my son blind." Anita cried and backed away. She looked at Matthew for help. "I swear I did not put that there." Matthew looked confused and shocked. He looked from the bracelet to Anita. The doubt in his eyes broke her heart. Rachel stepped forward with a smirk. "This proves she is just a gold digger, Matthew. She is trash." Matthew's mother screamed at the guards. "Get this woman out of my house. Do not let her near my son again." The guards grabbed Anita by the arm. She almost dropped Zion. They dragged her toward the heavy front doors. She begged them to stop, but no one listened. They threw her out onto the cold stone driveway. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut with a final boom. Anita sat on the ground in the dark. She held her crying son. She had lost everything in a single moment. Anita stared at the gossip blogs on her cracked phone. The headlines called her a thief and a disgrace. They said she was dragging Matthew down. She knew she had to save him from herself. She made the choice that broke her heart. She packed her few things in a plastic bag. She kissed Zion on the forehead and told him they had to go. She wrote a short note. She told Matthew he deserved someone who fit in his world. She left the key to the apartment he got her on the table. She walked out into the humid Lagos night. She went back to the slums. She took a job cleaning toilets at a bus terminal. The work was hard and the pay was low. Her hands grew rough again. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the silence in her heart. She missed the way Matthew looked at her. She missed his laugh. She cried herself to sleep on her thin mattress. She told herself she did the right thing. She saved him. Matthew was a ghost in his own company. He did not eat or sleep. He yelled at his staff. He could not accept that Anita stole from his mother. It did not make sense. Rachel came to visit him. She tried to touch his arm. She said she forgave him for his mistake with the maid. Her voice was fake and sweet. Matthew pulled away. He had a sudden thought. He called security and demanded the raw footage from the dinner party. Rachel looked nervous. Matthew fast-forwarded the video. He saw Anita leave the room to change Zion's diaper. Then he saw it. Rachel looked around to see if anyone was watching. She took the diamond bracelet from the table. She dropped it into Anita's open bag. Matthew froze the frame. The truth was undeniable. Rachel had set her up. He looked up at Rachel with cold fury in his eyes. He finally had the weapon he needed to fight for his love. Matthew stood outside the rusted gate of the compound. The air smelled of rain and dust. He looked at the crumbling walls of Anita's home. It was a stark contrast to his mansion in the city. He felt a deep shame in his chest. He had let his world almost destroy hers. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Anita opened it slowly. She wore a faded house wrapper and looked tired. Her eyes went wide when she saw him standing there. She tried to close the door to hide her poverty. But Matthew held it open gently. He did not care about the mud on his Italian shoes or the leaking roof. He stepped into the small dim room. He looked at her and spoke from his heart. He told her he was so sorry. He said he found out the truth about Rachel's lies and the setup. He apologized for not protecting her sooner. Anita tried to look away, but he held her rough hands in his smooth ones. He told her that his life was empty without her. He said he did not care about status or money or what his mother thought. He only wanted her. A small cry came from the corner of the room. It was Zion waking up. Matthew walked over to the worn mattress on the floor. He picked up the baby gently. Zion recognized him and cooed. Matthew looked back at Anita with tears in his eyes. He held Zion close to his chest. He told Anita that he wanted to be a father to Zion. He asked her to build a life with him. He promised no one would ever look down on them again. Anita started to cry. But this time they were tears of joy. She nodded yes. Months later they sat at a dinner table. It was not the same restaurant where they met, but it was just as beautiful. Anita wore a stunning dress that fit perfectly. She did not look terrified anymore. She looked radiant and confident. Matthew held her hand across the table. They laughed at a joke only they understood. There were no wrong tables this time. They were exactly where they belonged.